Hi everyone, I'm back with another last Epoch video, and this is my third and most likely last character I'm making in patch 1.1. I will have other things to do very soon, but I wanted to share this build with you because it's quite special. So this is a Blade Dancer rogue built around the Black Blade of Chaos. This is a new unique that was introduced in patch 1.1. It is a Harbinger drop. It drops from the Chaos Harbinger, which is in the Lagon timeline, and from Abaroth. I found this weapon from my first Abaroth kill actually, and I was very intrigued also when I saw it in the patch notes. Lethal Mirage is a really interesting skill. In case you don't know what it looks like, well, it's this. Basically, at least with this weapon. Usually it looks a little bit different, and you kind of disappear for a while, and then you have these shadows striking in your stead. So that's what it usually looks like. And with this weapon, it becomes effectively kind of a spammable skill thanks to this cooldown reduction effect. And it has a bunch of other perks. So it was a very interesting item and a skill that I had not yet really used on the rogue, even though I had played a bunch of builds on the class already. So I wanted to try it out. I do have to say it is somewhat complicated to play and to make this work. But with a bit of tweaking, and this is certainly not a final setup, this definitely works out relatively well and I think can be a quite potent build. So my character is only level 78. I didn't unfortunately go that far with this as I wanted because I got kind of like stopped in my tracks a little bit. But it does kind of come online at this point. So I've been experimenting a lot with this character, trying to make this Lethal Mirage work. And in the end, we actually arrived at a pretty interesting setup here. I'll also have a planner here. This is just kind of like a quick import of my character, but it has all of the necessary tools. So it's not like a fully min-max level 100 version because, as I mentioned, I just didn't go as far. But you can kind of start from here if you want to play this and then build it on your own, like with your own stuff. But it's relatively straightforward. I only have this unique item that is kind of mandatory for this to function. And everything else is just like random good gear that gives you like resist, life, damage, crit damage, dex, this kind of stuff. Basically nothing really crazy going on, and the skill tree is also pretty much built at this point, and you only get kind of like small improvements here. But the way this works is that you play around flow. Flow is a pretty interesting effect that is available to rogues on the Blade Dancer tree, where if you weave multiple skills together, you get a buff to the final skill of that combo. Basically, you do a combo of 4 skills or 5 skills. In this case, 5 actually. I would do 4, but it turns out that evade is actually a skill for the purpose of flow. As you can see, here is the buff, and I try to include this in my rotation. So usually the way that I do damage is that I do 1 puncture, I do 1 shuriken, then I do an evade, I do a shift, and then we do the Lethal Mirage finisher. Now, instead of the evade, you can also do, for example, the smoke bomb, which does have some perks, like it can apply some debuffs, shred armor, spawn shadows. The Lethal Mirage, for example, can also consume shadows with some specs to actually deal more damage. But this is kind of like how we go around. And I can also show this in action real quick, what this looks like. So you can just go into like a random echo. This is just like 100 corruption, nothing crazy. But I'm also just very low level for this. This is usually like the entry level of empowered monoliths, I guess. So it's just about fine. And the damage is actually fairly high. Even at this point with my crappy character, I can reach something like 5 to 15k crits. And you always crit with Lethal Mirage, thanks to the shift node here, the critical opening. That makes your next skill after shifting to be a guaranteed critical strike. And Lethal Mirage has 6 strikes, up to 8 for this, and then 10 to this. So you have 10 strikes, and this can be even more if you also consume shadows, for example, or some other things. So you could get more strikes. But you have 10 strikes, and they're all crit, and they do roughly like 50 to 100k plus damage if you combine them all together. And depending on the debuffs, depending on the resistances on the enemy. But you see this here right now. We do the evade, we do the flow, and then we press Lethal Mirage, and boom, they are dead. So this is fairly squishy right now. I think I have my resistance is not really properly capped on my armor here. I just unequipped some items here. This is not what I was playing earlier actually, because I put some stuff in my stash. But yeah, basically this is how it works. You have to do the combo with the flow, like this, and then nuke it down after the shift. The shift is always the last thing you do before the Lethal Mirage. So again, you can like, puncture around as much as you want. And then you do like 1 shuriken, an evade, a shift, and a lethal mirage. And it just kind of just kills everything around you. So it feels kind of interesting to play, to be honest. It is definitely a lot of work, I gotta say. It's not that easy, but it does kind of like come naturally after a while. So you kind of get the muscle memory for it. And there are other ways to play this. You don't necessarily have to play around the flow if you don't want to. This is somewhat optional. It gives you a decent damage buff, at least early on. For my character, this is pretty useful. But I think later on, when you have really good gear and you add something like plus 4, 5, 600% increased damage from, lightning damage, for example, melee damage, these kind of effects, then yeah, we don't really need to try hard with this flow anymore. Maybe you can even completely free up those points and put them elsewhere and then just get like other effects here. But this is kind of the skill tree right now. And at least for the early game, this worked out for me. I think later on, I would be too bothered by this to always do this flow stuff. And you can kind of just like, run in, do your shift, do your lethal mirage. You just need to be at least that combo, I guess, to make sure that you do the 100% crit, because we don't really stack in crit. We just have the crit from the shift. And you see all these numbers are yellow. I don't have any crit really on my gear. I have 6% crit chance here on my character sheet. This is thanks to the shift. And this also gives us other buffs, like we do a lot more damage with the next attack after shifting. We have this here, for example, and this here. So these are two pretty strong multiplicative damage buffs that also play into the same shift into lethal mirage combo. So this is kind of how that works. This suggestion was actually made to me by a viewer of mine. I had previously not played with this critical opening, because usually I use shift for like the invulnerability and for the healing and mana and so on. There's a bunch of really good stuff on this tree. But it turns out if you want to use this one nuke every, let's say, around 2 seconds, because of this combo on the cooldown that lethal mirage brings, it actually works out superb, because you can get the shift cooldown down to roughly 2.5 seconds or so if you have some cooldown reduction. Right now I don't have any cooldown recovery speed. I only have the shift tree itself that gives it a bit of cooldown recovery speed. But you could have 2 rolls here. There's one on the belt, one on the boots, and you can get to like 2.5 seconds or so. So this is kind of like the minimum break between the individual attacks. But you also have these multi-hits. And it's also really good because it applies a lot of debuffs very easily. You can get shreds really fast. You can get your shock really fast. You can get bleed, slow, frailty, chill, everything super easily, because you get those 10 hits from lethal mirage every single time. So it, especially for single targets, is relatively good. In big AoE fights, it's not that good because it has only those 10 hits and they don't have any AoE. However, usually small trash just dies one shot no matter what. Even elites sometimes are one shot right now at my level. And of course on higher corruption this might be a bit harder, but the gear can get a lot better. And this is still fine for AoE clear. I did actually not really notice having too much trouble with the AoE clear after all. But so you kind of just like walk in there, you see here, kapow, and this is it. And then you just kind of shift your way through. One puncture, one shuriken, one evade, one shift, and here comes lethal mirage, and it just like decimates everything. Now you might be wondering why some of these skills are included here. Okay, let's talk about that real quick. We have puncture. It's a free skill, which is nice. It also gives us mana back, because it's a very, very mana hungry setup. Lethal Mirage baseline costs 45, and we're gonna make it cost a lot more than that because of the coated blades. So this adds a flat 40 mana cost to a melee or bow attack. So this actually costs 85 mana. And you see here when I press the button, it goes down to basically nothing. My entire mana bar is consumed. And puncture helps us with that. It can give us 4 mana on hit, and you can also get 4 hits really fast in succession with this effect here. This is the rapid strikes. So you can get some mana back while you're waiting for a cooldown, just like punch stuff a little bit basically. And it can give us bleeds and also frenzy, which gives us attack speed, which is nice. And the bleeds are interesting because there is something on the tree here for lethal mirage, which is sundering blows. So this says that lethal mirage deals more damage per stack of bleed on a target. You want to have 15 stacks of bleed ideally to get the maximum benefit, and this is 60% bonus for 2 points. So this is pretty massive. However, the bleed that you usually apply with the lethal mirage here is converted to shock. So this is this node here, the shocking grasp, which is we convert everything to lightning. We stack lightning damage if we can. And the weapon itself also has lightning damage and lightning penetration, so there's some synergy here. But it makes it so that instead of bleed, you now shock, which is nice because shock also reduces lightning rest on the enemy, but we have to apply bleed another way, and this is where puncture comes in. So you puncture, especially bosses, maybe some rares, a few times, and they have like easily 10, 15 bleed stacks after a few attacks, because you have a lot of bleed here, and the rest comes from the Lethal Mirage, basically with the shock, and then all of your other debuffs that you have, armor, shred, frailty, whatever you put on your gear, and this is why we have this skill. Then we have the smoke grenade. It looks like this. Right now I've actually specced into the Umbral Assault here on the bottom left. This is a shadow creation. Every second you get one shadow, which is kind of nice if we had more skill points in our Lethal Mirage, because there's this node here, Umbral Feast, which right now I have not taken yet. But once I get items that give me plus extra skills and I get to like rank 22, rank 23 or more on Lethal Mirage, you want to take this. Because per shadow consumed you get another 10% multiplier, which is pretty massive. But there are a bunch of other really good multipliers all over the street that we want to take first. So I talked about the extra mirages and the lightning conversion here. There's also lightning pen, or physical pen that becomes lightning pen basically. That's really powerful. And also here there's extra mirages per shadow, for example. So you can sometimes throw the smoke down and then still get the shadows, and you still get extra mirages. And this can get even stronger once you have more skill points and you can invest into Umbral Feast. But most of the time I leave out the smoke, or I replace, for example, the evade and my flow combo with that. And there's a bunch of other small effects here that the smoke brings. For example, cleanse ailments, the silver shroud, so you can get a guaranteed dodge on one big hit, for example. And also the smoke blades that gives you extra flat damage. And then you have the shuriken. So the shuriken is included for mostly the flow combo. Also has a bunch of bleed here, which is nice, and the armor. So there is bladed armor down here that gives you 30% armor per blade that spins around you. So there's this node here where you can make the blades spin for 4.5 seconds with one upgrade. So you just have them spinning here, and you see how my armor goes up. I have 48% armor when this is up, and then 21% when this is down. It goes from 800 here to either 2000, or when I get a proc, to 3000 armor just on the shuriken. This is these nodes down here, plus the flip of a coin that 50-50 gives you +4 shurikens spinning around you, and they also grant more armor. So this is really powerful. So this is why this is included, and it kind of just fits naturally in this playstyle where, okay, we do our attack, and then, you know, shuriken, one puncture, and evade, and then we carry our flow here into the pack. We do a shift, and then find some guys, press Lethal Mirage, and then right click, shuriken, evade, and here we go. So this kind of works out pretty naturally, but as I mentioned, if you don't want to do the flow stuff, you don't really have to, and you can kind of just like shift, lethal, and then shift, lethal. So I can kind of do this 2-button combo, but it might be a bit harder on your mana. You see my mana is now going down, and it's not really that smooth anymore because I'm not puncturing at all. My damage is a bit lower because I'm not applying the bleed from the synergies I explained earlier. So you kind of want to do that, at least against higher end content and bosses. But for now, this is, you don't have to do this on every single trash monster basically. So it's just fairly straightforward. And you see here, you can almost one-tap these mini bosses in the maps, for example. Boom. So it feels kind of fun to play. It's very unique. I think I've not played anything like it, at least, because it just kind of like auto targets all around you. There is actually also an idol. It's a 2x2 idol for rogues that gives you a larger radius in which the lethal mirages spawn. So that is something cool to try out as well. I have not actually found one yet of this character, but I was going to try it and see. But yeah, otherwise, you can look at my gear, look at my planner. You want to stack a lot of dexterity thanks to the Black Blade. You get extra lightning pen for your dexterity, so you want to try to get a lot of it to just scale your damage, stack your additive damage as well, and at the same time get the penetration bonus. So this is really valuable. If you get a good roll of this item, then you can get a lot of extra damage from this penetration effect, basically. So that's really good. And yeah, as I mentioned, stack some armor, flat armor in particular. You don't really want percent armor because the shuriken gives you percent. So you want to have flat armor like this here, or the, for example, the armor and crit damage reduction modifier is kind of nice to have as well to make sure that you remain crit immune. So you can have this on like 1 or 2 items. And I would recommend to go for endurance as well. It's kind of nice to have endurance as a life-based build. Otherwise, just stack more life, I guess, especially softcore. You can skip endurance, but do not neglect your resistances, or at least cap those if you can. And this is pretty much it. So this is the setup. It's kind of funny. I like it a lot. So when I come back to last Epoch after my trip to US for the Spiritborn and the Diablo 4 expansion, then I will maybe try and min-max this character a little bit, maybe get it to like level 90, 95 or so, and see, maybe I'll make an update. But for now, I know a lot of people were curious about the Lethal Mirage build, so I wanted to share this with you guys before I go. Unfortunately, I didn't really get that far, but it does work and it is really fun and interesting to play. So can recommend. Not really the best blade dancer build, I would say, but it works. I'm quite curious to see some actual high-end version of this. For now, this is what I got to share here for you. Hope you enjoyed this. I have the planner with like my current setup here in the description. I would recommend maybe play this minimum at level 72. I guess you have to be to equip that weapon, but maybe at around level 80 or so is when you have all of the necessary points, your skills at level 20, and you know, it kind of just like becomes a full setup. So I would not recommend to try to level with Lethal Mirage. I've done that with this character and it was not going too well. So I just go with like a typical Umbral Blade setup first, or you know, some Shadow Cascade or so to get to like around 75, 80, and then you can swap. So this is my recommendation. Hope you liked this video and see you guys next time.